Off to the wide receiver position. First wide receiver off the board is a big favorite of being Jackson Smith-Njigba. Now, if you wanted to go to one of the long shots, the next two guys, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, that's 5-1, 7-1, Quentin Johnson sitting 10-1. If you look at these mock drafts out there, Stephen, and if you kind of look at really and truly where these guys are going to go, it seems to be like it is pretty much the consensus that it's going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba going. If you look here, there is a very, very strong tie to that second pick that the Texans have. To once it gets to them at 12, that they would pull the trigger on a wide receiver because it's a team that just doesn't have any and doesn't have one. And he could then step in and just kind of be your guy there on the offensive side of the board. I would say that is pretty strong to go with Njigba there at 12. But listen, that's why his number is sitting 12.5, right? Because he has one. It's almost a 1-out bet for that one too, right? I mean, it's like almost a 1-out bet for that one because you just can't really put a strong tie to him in any of those other teams in the top 11 picks.
Are you convinced he's going to be the first wide receiver drafted? Because you and I,
wide receiver to me is always the least predictive position of any of them because different teams fall in love with different traits for different guys. And that is why to me, I tend to not have a ton of wide receiver bets in my portfolio each year because it's some guys want a burner. Some guys want a big bodied dude. Some guys want an excellent route runner who can move the chain. Like there are different needs for different teams that they instantly, that in their brain, they can plug that guy into the offense and he becomes an instant contributor. And so that's why to me for at the wide receiver position, it's so incredibly volatile that I just don't like to get a ton of stuff in my portfolio with wide receivers, which is why if it was Jackson Smith-Njigba, I would play the over just because, again, like the variance at the position, right? Like I'd always play the over on him, and I'd probably play one of the other guys to go first as well, strictly based off of what I just said.
Here's why I'm taking a stab at somebody else in this market. And JSN has gotten as short as -400 at PointsBet, I believe, to be the first wide receiver off the board. And I think that's a little crazy. I think this price has taken off based on mock drafts and fantasy football evaluations and dynasty rookie drafts and whatnot, because this is really about how teams evaluate wide receivers. And there have been multiple reliable draft reporters out there saying that some teams view Jackson Smith-Njigba as a slot-only receiver. And it wasn't too long ago that was the reason one of the best receivers in the league, Justin Jefferson, started sliding down the first round because some teams viewed him as a slot-only receiver. It's dumb, but it happens. Ask Cooper Kupp if it matters if you're a slot-only receiver who won Super Bowl MVP. So the reason I bring this up is because, Daniel Jeremiah is one of, if not the most respected draft analyst in the game. He wants to be right with his mock drafts, but he's also tied into a lot of team sources, obviously working for the NFL Network. And he has been steady with ranking Jordan Addison as his number one wide receiver. And not just number one of the top 10 overall players in this draft, despite draft Twitter downgrading him big time for a poor combine. The other thing I'll mention is Pete Schrager, who has been awful when it comes to quarterback news in his mock drafts, but has hit on a lot of other really good information in recent years at other positions. And he said he knows of at least one team that has Jordan Addison as their number one wide receiver still. And to your point, Matt, this draft does not have a burner. There is no wide receiver that went out and ran in the 4.3s. So the Henry Ruggs style guys that skyrocket up draft boards are not a threat to Jordan Addison this year. So, you can get 10-1 on Jordan Addison to be the first wide receiver drafted in this go around.
Right. Do 1 in 10 drafts. And that's it. That's what we have to say. Like, does that happen 1 in 10 drafts? And I think in 1 in 10 drafts, it probably does because we've seen wide receiver be so incredibly volatile.
Yeah, for sure. And the other two wide receiver bets I've made are tying teams to the wide receiver market out there. The Dallas Cowboys in the past have not exactly been good at hiding their intentions with the NFL draft, right? They have had visits and in-depth connections with JSN, Josh Downs, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt. We already know their defense is elite. They got quarterback locked up. Offensive line is good. They have Tony Pollard on the franchise tag. That's some pretty steady smoke there on the wide receiver market for Dallas, and you can get them plus 500 or better for their first pick to be a wide receiver. And the other one that's kind of out of left field, Matt, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They obviously have a lot of needs outside receiver, but I mean, the Eagles just lost the Super Bowl with an elite defense to Patrick Mahomes, who had the worst wide receiving core of his career. The Jaguars have to know that if they're going to get to the Super Bowl, they're going to have to outscore Kansas City. And I can't imagine that they're exactly satisfied with Christian Kirk, not a real number one wide receiver. And who knows what Calvin Ridley will be coming off a year away from the game, if he'll be the same guy. You can get 15-1 on Jacksonville to take a wide receiver in their first pick. And they're in that spot towards the bottom of the first round where all the good offensive linemen should be gone. You know, all the premier defensive players should be gone. Those wide receivers are going to kind of start collecting there at the bottom of the first round. I know this one's out of left field, and I see you shaking your head. I'm just throwing it out there.
No chance. They got Kirk and Ridley. They're going into the season with Kirk and Ridley. They ain't taking a wide receiver. That ain't happening.
I like the other ones better, but that's kind of a little out of left field lunch money one at 15-1.
They ain't taking a receiver. Y'all can save your money. Right. What we can do though is over under 3.5. What we can start to look at is which receivers do we think for sure are going in round one? Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison seem to be very consensus that these are going to be first round picks. Yeah. Quentin Johnson is in the first round in the vast majority of mock drafts that are out there. So what that does is basically we have to decide, does this mean, what is the chances of like a Jalen Hyatt getting into the first round if we want to take kind of like the over of the 3.5? Because I mean, again, it's like you want two outs here. Quentin Johnson could slip. We actually see him in a lot of these drafts starting to slip and start to drift out of the first round. So he's an out, and Jalen Hyatt is an out. How many times did Jalen Hyatt sneak into the first round and Quentin Johnson fall out? How many times do both of these guys get into the first round and we easily cruise over the 3.5 number? It's just something we need to kind of start to assess here. I tend to lean towards the over here pretty heavily. I think there are some receiver needy teams towards the end of the first round that really could come in and just start scooping up these receivers. I mean, the Chargers certainly need a receiver. Ravens, if they don't end up trading for DeAndre Hopkins or whatever in the hell else they're trying to do with all of that. The Vikings, if they don't go quarterback, could certainly use someone to help out Justin Jefferson so he doesn't just get double teamed every single time he runs a route out there. The Giants certainly need help at the receiver position. You mentioned the Cowboys already. The Bills need a true number 2 because Gabe Davis has not turned out to be that guy for them. So, I mean, there are some teams that could take receivers towards the end of the first round. And so I lean pretty heavily towards the over on total number of wide receivers in the first round.
Yeah, I respect your opinion on it. I can see it. I mean, it is one of the 5 premium positions that are worth the cost of a first round contract and a first round pick, because if you hit on one, then you're getting a huge discount on the market for second contract wide receivers. So it makes a ton of sense to me to just kind of fire at wide receiver at the end of the first round in the same way teams fire at quarterback throughout the first round. It's a weak class, right? It's a weak class. After you get past the top 15 picks, which I would argue none of these wide receivers are in the top 15 blue chip players, then it's really interchangeable between 16 through 50. It seems is the consensus. So you could see these teams just waiting to get whoever's left there for them in the second round. I'm more bullish on the tight end market, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But I don't have a strong opinion either way on the number of wide receivers in the first round. But based on recent history, 3.5 is a very low number for the number of wide receivers in the first round.
Yeah, because I mean, if we think 3 are going for sure, then
what was this number last year for like 5.5?
Yeah. If we think 3 are going for sure, then we just have to ask how many times does that fourth one go? And is it worth betting that over? And in a passing league with so many teams that certainly could look at that position as a need, then we certainly can kind of look at it like that.